So, good evening, or whatever it is for you, morning, afternoon, or evening. And we will begin, as usual, with these classes with our introductory prayers, beginning with the Mahamudra lineage supplication and then refuge and bodhicitta, followed by the four measurables. So, we will do that now. Dorje Chonchen Telon Marpa Mila Chuje Gambo Tu Sun Shija Kun Ken Kama Che Shi Chuje Chupa Zena Prita Saso Paden Rupa Zaman Chaja Chela Nibe Nyame Drogon Tabo Kajuala Soma Debso Kajuala Mana Chupa Zeno Nantar Shelo Gonji Kambar Subashin Zenor Kona Chaksheme Badang Sedir Dutang Chupe Gorjela Nekor Shempa Meparji Mugo Gorji Gomor Subashin Menga Tego Jebe Lama Judo Zoma Depe Gorjela Chume Mugo Kewaji Yeme Gorji Angushi Sobashin Nachu Kangshar Tope Ngomo Somade Maju de Karjo Gonjela Gonja Lodang Drawarji Jialum Nadom Chukur Bashin Chiamayin Chiryaja Gorde Yeme Topa Jialom Kewa Kunju Yada Lamadam Drame Juki Pala Jujin Sadala Jiyudera Zoine Turje Jangi Kopanyo Dorjo Dorje Jangi Dorje Jangi Kopanyo Dorjo Sanjay Chudan Soki Chonam Chanchu Pardu Dadni Kamsuji Taki Jinso Jipe Sonaki Rola Penchir Sanjay Chupar Shor Sanjay Chudam Soki Chonam La Chanchu Pardu Dadni Kyapsuji Daki Jinso Jipe Sonaki Jola Penchir Sanjay Drupar Shor Sanjay Chudan Soki Chonam La Chanchu Pardu Dadni Kyapsuji Taki Jinso Jipe Sonagi Chola Penchir Sanjay Trupar Sinchen Samche Dema Dan Demi Judan Dempar Jurchen Duka Dan Duka Ji Judan Tramar Jurchen Duka Mepe Dema Dampa Dami Dramar Jurchen Nidhi Jata Nidam Drawe Tanyo Jempo Lani Parjurchi Sinche Tamche Devada Dewe Juda Dembar Jurchi Dukada Dukaji Juda Drawar Jurchi Dukkha mepe dema dabada midrawar jurchi nedi jata nidan drawe tanyo champola me par jurchi Sinche tamche dema da dewe juda dembar jurchi Dukkha dan dukkha ji judan drawar jurchen dukkha me be dema da badang mi drawar jurchen nedi chata nidang Drawe Tanyo Jambola Nepar Jurchin. Abadin Sawe Lama Rinpoche Adaki Chimo Pede Denjola Kajun Jambo Guni Jisunte Kusundu Gingo Drup Sadu So Dada Sinjun Tanje Mo Chisun Dromar Jinje Laptu So Chu Lamdu Dromar Jinje Laptu So Lam Trupa Sawa Jinje Laptu So Trupa Yeshi Chawa Jinje Laptu So Namo Alai Kedanu Danu Jinke Rupu Dada Mi Kenadan Dromo Kunji Draki Jizamban Tamji Kedu Daki Chuten Kang Se Tama Zuba Am Chungze Chimo Dunayan Gopo Jamya Denini Gebe Payan Tomar Rome Dokame Jibu Again Kangi Junji Genu Jun Jabeyan La Jasono Kangi Junji Dadawa Kewe Shena Da Chaksa. I bow to Manju Shri, through whose kindness a virtuous mind arose. I also bow to those spiritual friends whose kindness made me thrive. Okay, so that is our um, introductory prayers. So now I will begin the main body of the presentation. So we are talking a little bit about Buddhist history. Specifically, I will talk about the origin of Dharma in Tibet. So if we were doing really kind of an exhaustive treatment, we would talk about the spreading of Dharma in India and how it came to Tibet. But of course, that's outside of the scope of this immediate presentation. So actually, I was thinking about this, and if I really wanted to do a detailed presentation, I would do a teaching, or I would do a single class for each kind of lineage, each separate lineage that flourished in Tibet. But of course, we don't have time for that. Um, so, but before we do that, in any case, I thought would be a good idea if we present a little bit about how the Dharma initially spread in Tibet and how it arose and developed before we get into the lineages. So that will the lineages themselves. What we usually call the four major lineages. Actually, there's more than that, but there's four kind of major schools, and we'll talk about toward the end. So what I would like to do is, since there's kind of a lot of names and kind of like personal names and place names and dates and information, that I thought I would share my screen. I prepared this kind of presentation, so I think it would be easier for you to grasp that way. So I'm going to share my screen now so you can um, look at it, and then I will make some, remarks here and there. Let me see. Screen. Um, Okay, can you see that?
No, we cannot see your screen. We still see you.
What happened? Okay, let me go back to my.
And Zoom, you've got to go to the share screen at the bottom.
So I did that, and then it's showing me entire screen. I get these three choices, and I clicked on entire screen, but then it's not doing anything. Won't let me go further. It also gives me the options of Chrome tab, window, and enter entire screen.
Yeah, if you have it set, each thing open up in a separate Chrome tab, the easiest thing is to just select Chrome tab. And then it will give you the list of open tabs, and then you can just pick the one that
Oh,
you.
okay. Okay, let's try this. All right, can you see that?
No.
What did I? Okay, so when I press three ancestral Dharma kings, then I get a little image of it on the side, but I can't, I can't open that. So I apologize for the delay here. I'm a little bit technology challenged. I always have these problems. Maybe Newton, you got those. I sent you the
I was just looking for those.
Maybe you can share it.
Okay, the first one you want to do is the three ancestral kings.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So let me. Okay, I've got that open now. Now I just need to bring it up. That's what you want to see, right?
I don't see anything. I'm stuck in this.
Oh, I have it set up as showing from my end. In Zoom, do you see it?
It won't let me out of this. I don't see any way of getting out of this.
Oh, you're showing. Okay, now you're showing. You are showing your screen now.
No, I just canceled mine. So what I see is yours.
Yeah, well, you see mine now.
Yes. Yes. So can everyone see it?
Yeah, everybody should be able to see it since
Okay.
you can.
All right. Maybe make it a little bit bigger.
Okay.
So basically, the way in which what enabled the Dharma to spread in Tibet to the extent that it did, and with the success that it did, was due, in large part, due to the aspirations and activity of what we call these three ancestral Dharma kings. And the first of them was King Songtsen Gampo. And so as you see here, so he reigned. So he lived and he lived in the 6th century. It was quite a long time ago. And before Songtsen Gompo, there was no Dharma had not taken root. There is a story of a king connected with this Yarlung dynasty several generations before. I can't remember his name, before Songtsen Gompo. And it said there's the story that the first Buddhist texts, like sutras, that came into Tibet, according to some versions, these texts fell onto the palace roof. But according to other Tibetan sources, probably the way we would kind of understand and look at it these days is that these texts, these sutras, were brought by traders, probably from China, because the Dharma entered China some centuries, a number of centuries before it entered Tibet. So probably from China. But at that time, Tibet was kind of uncivilized. They didn't even have, so these texts weren't translated. They might have been in Chinese, they might have been in Sanskrit or another language. So they had these texts, but it couldn't benefit anyone because they couldn't read them. So that's what they talk about. That's like, the first instance of Dharma texts entering Tibet. But when we get to Songtsen Gompo, he had the aspiration to develop the Dharma in Tibet. And so he's the 33rd Tibetan king of the Yarlung. It's called the Yarlung dynasty. Yarlung was a place in Tibet. And he founded this Tibetan empire. He through military conquests, he actually spread the Tibet kingdom into parts of Nepal and China and all kinds of places. It was very big, actually. And so that brought him into, this is before he became Buddhist, but that brought him into contact with these other civilizations. And so this is like before Triyana Detsen is the next Dharma king who really kind of developed Dharma. But so he was Triyana Detsen's grandfather. So he was able to kind of like cultivate Tibet for this kind of transformation, and so that the Dharma could really permeate Tibetan culture. And what he did, so with that, so Songtsen Gompo was able, if he hadn't, if we didn't have him, there would be no Tibetan alphabet, and Lhasa would have no. So the Jokang temple was built under his rule. And then there's the famous Jo Shakyamuni statue, which I'm going to talk about. So this is all due to his kindness. And what happened, so before that, there was this Bun religion. It's more like an indigenous shamanistic tradition. And, there wasn't much, in terms of Dharma present at that time. So there was no translations of the Buddhist scriptures for the reasons that I mentioned. And because there's no written form of Tibetan, it's really kind of like a backward culture in some sense. And so the king had this vision of, sending this minister who's very, very bright, very intelligent, Tomi Samboto, who's very famous. Really, actually, we can talk also about Tomi Samboto was one of the, was incredibly important because he was sent to India by the king, and he developed the written language based upon the Devanagari script of Sanskrit. So, so Tomi Samboto was incredibly important. So he went to India. He was very bright. He studied very hard. Then he learned Sanskrit, and other like Prakrit languages, and he developed this Tibetan script. And he also wrote the first Tibetan grammar, some of which are still extant and they are studied to this day. And then after that, he commissioned really it's like several thousand texts to be translated. And Tomi Sambota, taught translation to assistants of his, and basically then this period of translation of the Buddhist scriptures began in earnest. And so he was, and but at the same time, Sangsun Gopa was spreading this empire into Nepal and China, and especially so this brought him into contact with these other cultures. Um, so um, and then he actually, what's really important is that he studied Chinese. I mean, he became very skilled, because he was coming into contact with the Chinese emperors. And he became very skilled in government and leadership. And so then he adopted, based upon these Buddhist scriptures, the codes of conduct based upon the Buddhist ethics and discipline. And so that kind of began to replace the shamanistic practices of the Bunpo. So Bun is this indigenous tradition of Tibet. But actually, what's really interesting, and it doesn't say it directly, and I kind of think that Sangsun Gompa would not be a Buddhist if he didn't come up, if he didn't meet his two queens. And so it's kind of like, I don't know how these things worked in the old days, but he was sent these the emperor of the Tang dynasty in China sent his daughter or something. So we call her Wen Chen. That was one queen who was deeply Buddhist, and then and also the daughter of the Pali Lichavi dynasty king Brikuti, and so they're both regarded as emanations of green and white Tara, respectively, because they're really important for the development of Buddhism. So I suspect, and I could be wrong, but I really think it's due to the kindness and the influence, because they do say this, of Brikuti, the Nepalese queen, and uh, um, Wen Chen, the Chinese queen, that he became Buddhist. They exerted a great influence over him, and so and more importantly, they brought like gifts for gifts for the Tibetan king, and these gifts were the part of the heritage of their culture, which is basically like Buddhist statues and scriptures. Um, so like it said that, so Wen Chen brought for Songtsen Gompo these Chinese, texts of classic Chinese literature and texts, and texts on astrology and feng shui and medicine, and of course, most importantly, some Dharma texts. And she brought this exquisite statue to Tibet called it's a statue of Shakyamuni made by a famous sculptor at the age of 12. It's called the Jowo Shakyamuni. And we still have that. It's present to this day. You can actually see it, and that is now housed. What Wen Chen, the famous statue that Wen Chen brought, the Jowo Shakyamuni, is actually housed in the temple that she helped to build. Is the Jokang Temple in Lhasa, which is like, one of the most sacred and important pilgrimage sites in Tibet, and people come from far and wide, or to see this temple, and then also the Nepalese queen brought another statue, and sometimes it's called the Jowo Mikyu Dorje, but it's another statue of the Buddha. And another temple called the Ramoche Temple was built to house that. And so, so these statues, in the Buddhist tradition, if you're not Buddhist, maybe it doesn't make so much sense. We kind of just think of these like statues and such as maybe just, kind of like decoration. But actually, these statues and texts, especially the statues, and also we talk about stupas, represent we consider them to represent the actual Buddha. They are, in a way, they are the actual Buddha, because they are considered to be one aspect of the Buddha's Dharmachakra or emanation body. And so it's said that the Buddha's blessing enters into any statue or likeness or image, anything whatsoever. And then that statue or that image or stupa, whatever it is, takes on, actually becomes the Buddha. So if you go into a sacred temple like this, like those of you who've been to KTD can, and first time you see the shrine room, we have this experience, we have this kind of feeling that we're entering into the sacred space, and our minds can transform, and that's because of the power and blessing of these statues. So I can't say too much about that. So the statues themselves did a lot to make the Dharma, a suitable place, or make Tibet a suitable place for Dharma. So they're really important. So we can skip down. I'm not going to go through this part. We're now going to talk about the next Dharma king. So I'm taking too much time. So King Trisen Detsen. So then, so Songtsen Gompo did all these things, and especially because of these cleans, he became very faithful Buddhist, and toward the end of his life, he actually did some retreats and really started the practice of Dharma. But it wasn't until the time of his grandson that Dharma really began to take root and spread in Tibet. So his grandson was King Trisen Detsen. He's the most famous of these three ancestral kings, and arguably the most important. So he was the 38th emperor of Tibet, and he ruled from. So now we're so a little bit later. So in the Common Era, 755. Then the dates are a little bit disputed. Into early, possibly end of the 8th century, or very early. His rule extended into the 9th century. And as it says here, he truly established the Dharma in Tibet. And so whereas Songtsen Gompo was considered an emanation of Chenrezig, the Bodhisattva compassion, Avalokiteshvara, Trisen Detsen was considered an emanation of the Bodhisattva wisdom on Jushri. So his contributions to the Dharma were really kind of monumental in comparison. And he really just to establish the Dharma. So I have this quotation of Dingo Khyentse Rinpoche, and he would say, and so this Dzongtse Khyentse Rinpoche, who was his personal disciple, told the story. Dzongtse Khyentse Rinpoche said, with tears in his eyes, so Khyentse Rinpoche, kind of had tears when he talked about Trisen Detsen. He would say, if one were to fill every canyon, every gorge, every hole on the earth with gold as high as Mount Meru, not even a fraction of the kindness of Trisen Detsen could be repaid. So that's a very strong statement. So Dharma could not have flourished in Tibet without Trisen Detsen. And then what he did is that he knew he had to bring authentic Buddhist masters, and he couldn't, so he couldn't really develop the Dharma in Tibet. He wasn't learned. He wasn't, particularly well practiced in the beginning of his life. Later, he became a really great master in his own right. And so, and against the advice of his, he had a lot of ministers who really still were kind of like didn't trust the Dharma, and but he insisted on sending emissaries to first to bring the Bodhisattva abbot Shantrokshita, one of the great scholars or Panditas of India, to Tibet to found the first monastery, Samye, and to ordain the first Buddhist monks, in terms of what we talk about, the 7 men to be tested. And but when he came to Tibet, there was still a lot of obstacles when they tried to start building this temple of Samye. They just couldn't do it. Every time they started to like lay the foundation, at night it said that these hostile forces would undo their work, and but Shantraksita was a great scholar and a great master, a great upholder of the Vinaya, but he said, I don't have the power to tame the Tibetans, and especially these spirits that were opposed, and these local deities who were opposed to the Dharma. And so he said, told the king, you have to invite the great Adam, the great Siddha, Padmasambhava, Guru Rinpoche. He's the only one. And so on the advice of the great Kempo, the abbot, Shantraksita, then indeed priests and Detsen sent emissaries to invite the great Siddha, Guru Rinpoche or Padmasambhava. And the importance of Guru Rinpoche on the spread of Vajrayana and Dharma as a whole in Tibet and throughout the world, actually, is inconceivable. And his kindness, it's said that his kindness to Tibet and in really taming the Tibetans, and really he was the one who really made it possible for the Dharma to spread. It's his kindness is so very great, and for this reason, it's actually said that Guru Rinpoche is not only like an important lineage guru in what came to be known the first school that's to arise in Tibet, the Nyingma school, the Nyingma lineage, but actually, according to my guru Kyabti Droma Rinpoche, he can be considered a lineage guru for all Tibetan schools, because without him, the Dharma would not have taken root. There was just too many obstacles at the time. It just would not have happened, and especially for the Vajrayana. So it's said that because it was only due to the kindness of Guru Rinpoche that the Vajrayana was really able to take root in Tibet. And interestingly, if you look at Chinese Buddhist history, the Chinese had, very well developed, also Buddhist culture, as I said, several centuries before the advent of Buddhism in Tibet. But the secret mantra, Vajrayana, did not really take root extensively in China. And I think this is because Guru Rinpoche's activity he wasn't invited there. He wasn't able to go there. So it's mainly they practice the sutra teachings, which are of course are wonderful and important. But there's a little bit, but it was only practiced by some of the kings and the ministers in these great some of the great dynasties later. So anyway, that's an aside. But so I can't shower enough praise on Guru Rinpoche, just in trying to make you understand, his greatness, his importance. But, yeah, this. So we have to leave it there. We have to keep going, not end, but I still have a lot to talk about. But so these three together, so we say the abbot, the kempo, or the abbot, or the abbot of the kempo, that's Shandrak Shita, and then the king, and then Guru Rinpoche. These three together really were able to make the Dharma flourish in Tibet. And the Dharma, the tradition that flourished, that it didn't really have a name at that time, was later called the Nyingma, or Ngajra Nyingma, actually. Nyingma actually means ancient. Ning is like old or ancient, and Ma is like the ancient school or ancient ones. And then Ngajur, when we add this term Ngajur in the beginning, Ngajur also means early, or old. And Jur is translations. So the ancient transmission of the of the early transmission of the early translations, because there was these two translation periods. So later it got this term, because it was these two disseminations of Dharma in Tibet. So basically everything that came at the time, the translations that were developed from Songsung Gongpo, and especially during, they really took off during the time of Guru, Triyana Detsen and Guru Rinpoche. All these many great translators started working on the translation of Buddhist scriptures in consultation with. They also brought these a number of other very important scholars, Indian Panditas, to Tibet, and so in conjunction, working together, they translated an enormous number of scriptures into Tibetan. So this is a great kindness. And then later, for reasons that you'll see, then so all these the translations that were happening at this time were all called the Ngajur, the ancient translations. And then when the Dharma, the line of Tibetan kings came to an end later, which you're going to see, and then after some time, they invited more Buddhist masters to Tibet, and another wave of translators were trained, and Buddhist Panditas were invited to Tibet. And so that was the second, we call the second spread of the Dharma in Tibet. So those are called collectively the later, all that. I'm going to talk more about this. All this that was done later was called the Sarma transmission. Sarma means the new schools, or Chijur Sarma, and Chijur means the later translations of the new schools, and all the other schools that came. Came to be at that time, that we'll describe, are called these newer schools. So that's Sarma. They're all called Sarma. And then, so before we get to that, then we have to talk about. So that's So we'll skip ahead. So now we have to talk a little bit about the third Dharma king, Rinpoche. So King Tri Rinpoche. And so he was the grandson of Triyana Detsen, and was the 40th king of the Yonlun dynasty. And his life was kind of tragic and was cut short because he was assassinated. He ruled from. So now we're talking a little bit later time of the current era, 815 through 38, that's when he was assassinated by his younger brother, Long Dharma. So Long Dharma is kind of like, the Mara, you know, like he was opposed to Dharma. And so he assassinated Sri Chen. And so because of that, he didn't have as much impact as he might have. But still, he did a lot, and he expanded the Tibetan kingdom at this time was like, China and Nepal were kind of like nothing. The Tibetan kingdom was said to had gone into China and Afghanistan and Pakistan, all these regions. It was huge. It was like had huge influence, and it grew to its furthest extent under Rinpoche. But then Rinpoche also became interested in Dharma, and he sponsored more translators and panditas and these scholars to come from India. And, because of that, many more scriptures were translated. And then in particular, this was really important. So he invited these scholars who now, like when you read the translations in, at the end notes of the translations of the Khandra, you see their names: Surendra Bodhi, Shilendra Bodhi, Dana Shila, and others. These are the most prominent. And they work, these Indian masters work with the Tibetan translators to produce this is the beginning of kind of the seeds of the new translation school, where they develop new terminology, and they developed a systematized or a kind of like they developed standardized translations for Sanskrit technical terms. And this is really important. And they simplified as well the translation process. So it said, the king once said to them, so when translating the teachings, he said, the scholars, they use many terms that were not known in Tibetan language. And so he wanted to change those terms, things that didn't make sense in Tibetan, to use simpler language, basically. And the things that were difficult to understand, to use this more familiar terminology, and sometimes even colloquial language. So this is a great contribution. And then the translations were really systematized at that time, and they had kind of rules for how you translated Sanskrit into Tibetan. Like now, we're translating many scriptures. Many scriptures are being translated from Tibetan into English, and we don't have this standardized. By contrast, we don't have this standardized vocabulary for translation. So every translation every translator has kind of like their own terms. So it can be very confusing. But in Tibetan, they develop this very systematic way of translating. And I suspect in a generation or two, for the English translations and translations in other languages, we will get this, but it's going to take some time. So this king, even though his life was shorter, his life was tragically cut short. They developed under his patronage. So the patronage of the Dharma kings is really important for the spread of Dharma. So they developed this very detailed, long Sanskrit Tibetan lexicon, and it's called Maha Vyutpati, and it's still extant today. So it's very, very, very influential and important work. And then with these, standardized Tibetan equivalents, they translated thousands of Tibetan technical terms. So so this is how it happens. The Panditas and the Lotsawas. So Lotsawa is kind of like a very it's a very honorific way of referring to a great translator. The great translators at that time were called Lotsawa. So Lotsawa was a corruption of an Indian term, and it means something like eyes of the world. Um, because it's like when you can translate into your own language, it's like then you become educated. It's like that enables you to understand. It's like being able to see what wasn't, what was obscured before, what was obscure to you before. So because of the great kindness of these Panditas and Lotsawas, we have the Dharma available to us today. So that was another great kindness, and we have to keep that in mind. They in earnest, translated Prajnaparamita Sutras. Everybody's heard like one of the shortest Prajnaparamita Sutras was the Heart Sutra, Prajnaparamita Hridaya, or the essence of the Prajnaparamita. Um, there's very long ones too. Without the great translator, all of this would mean nothing to us. So we have to keep their kindness in mind as well. And also the inner tantra. So the Nyingma school, they emphasize the tantric practice, as I will mention later. Our time. It is 8:56. So I have to move along here. So then, as you already know, as I mentioned, then Long Dharma, he had um, Tri Rinpoche assassinated. And Long Dharma took the throne. And then finally, um, Rinpoche himself was assassinated in 838. And that ended, or no, I'm sorry, the assassination of Rinpoche in 838 ended this period, this great uh, great period of patronage for the Buddhist teachings, the Dharma in Tibet. Um, so that was begun so many generations earlier with Songtsen Gompo. So then long afterward, Long Dharma, um, and he was considered unfit to rule. I thought, I was reading this in the text, and I thought, oh, it's like kind of reminds me of some, our own kind of current politics. I'm not going to go into that, but he was really considered unfit, and he was nasty, and he really disliked the Dharma. He had this antipathy toward the Dharma and all who practiced it. And the first thing that he did was he closed the monasteries, and he scattered the sangha. The sangha you're referring to monks and nuns, and forced them to go into exile or just disrobe. So very bad time. Tibet was like cast into a period of darkness. Um, but then this great yogi, Lalong Paji Dorje, it's said is often there's another. Sometimes they say there's another person, but he's most often credited in the histories with the assassination of Long Dharma in 842 or 846. But some people say it was they were both disciples of Guru Rinpoche, Nupchen, Sanjay Yeshe. So then his death was followed, so then there was this, followed by a civil war this dissolution of the Yarlung dynasty, and this is called the era of fragmentation. So then many years went by, and it was kind of really very difficult. And aside from small groups of kind of like yogi practitioners, what we call nakpas, lay tantric practitioners, um, their dharma didn't survive in an organized form. And the sangha was had to be reintroduced at a later time. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about Atisha, these great masters who were responsible for this new dissemination of Dharma in Tibet when the political circumstances allowed for it. So the most important was Atisha, but then also Rinchen Zongpo was one of the great translators. And then there's more, but the most important ones were Rinchen Zongpo, and then Lotsawa Lok Loden Sherop. And then, so they were along with others, they were principally responsible for this the rise and dissemination of this what we call the Dharma lineages. I will explain. So Atisha, was called Dipankara in Sanskrit, or as Tibetans called him, Joluje. Joluje is like very honorific language, Atisha. So he lived later, 982 to 1045, and he spent the last 9 or 10 years of his life, as you'll see, in Tibet. And more than anyone else, Atisha's his influence on Tibet and on Dharma as a whole was inconceivable. Kind of like Guru Rinpoche. He was incredibly important. And from Atisha's students arose what we now call the Kadampa school. Right? So you can see that here written. And so he came from this famous university, or we call it now like a Shedra, in India called Vikramashila. And I think also here earlier he taught at Nalanda, but at this later time in Indian Buddhist history, Vikramashila was a major place of study for the Mahayana, especially the Tantras and secret mantra. And he was also a very strict adherent of the Vinaya, or the monastic discipline, and was just, he was just an incredible master. We can't say enough about his greatness. And he was invited to Tibet by these two king of Western Tibet, Gaudi, and his I think his nephew. So they sent emissaries to invite Atisha. And Atisha, Atisha's meditation deity, Atisha was not an ordinary person. Atisha's Yidam or deity was, special deity was Tara. And he could just kind of like converse with Tara. He could get prophecies from Tara. And he kind of inquired, should I go to Tibet, or, would it be beneficial to me to go to Tibet, or should I stay in India and teach? He was one of the greatest panditas of the time in India, if not the greatest. So many people did not want him to go. But Tara, indicated to him in his prophecy, she said, if you go to Tibet, your life will be cut short by some 9 years. But your influence on Buddhism, influence on Dharma for future generations will be extremely vast, extremely profound. If you stay in India, you will live longer, but you will not have the same influence. And so, because he got this so Tara kind of encouraged him to go. So he went to Tibet, and he met many Tibetan disciples, and then and so because of this, he spent the last 9 or 10 years of his life teaching and disseminating Dharma, and also translating. He worked with the Tibetan Lotsawas to translate scriptures that had not been translated before, or revising some of the older translations. So he arrived in Tibet, and so now we're talking, now we're in the 11th century in 1042. And as it says here, spent the last 10 years of his life there. So his kindness, his influence was inconceivably great. And we can't imagine what Dharma would be like without him. Because what happened in this time of this period of fragmentation and darkness, people, especially with the secret mantra, they began to practice it in mistaken ways, and the monastic discipline declined, such that people who previously held their vows well gave up their vows, and so the Vinaya was like almost no more, it's almost like non-existent when Atisha got there. So there was all these corruptions that happened, uh, during this period of darkness and fragmentation. So Atisha reintroduced Vinaya, a discipline, and more monks were ordained. So the Sangha developed again for the second time. And he just put everything into developing the Dharma in Tibet. And his disciples, especially his heart's son, um, uh, was really the founder, like the founder of Reiting Monastery, was like the first Kadampa monastery. Druntonpa was Druntonpa was the main like heart son. He also, and Druntonpa was an incredible master in his own right. Then developed Reading Monastery and other monasteries, and then out of this, so that the Kadampa school developed. Um, and so with that, so that sets the stage. So this is the beginning. The Kadampa school was the beginning. So this was the first of the Sarma schools. So Sarma again means the later dissemination of the new translations. And especially, so some of the tantras that were translated at this time were not well known or present during the earlier dissemination of Dharma. And this is the tantras such as Hebadra, Chakrasambhara, um, Chatupita, the four-seat tantra. There's many, like Kalachakra, all these things um, were not, they translated these new, what are called the new tantras, and practiced the deities connected with them. And so the first kind of school to spring up at that time was Kadampa, and the Kadampa really emphasized the monastic discipline. They would say that your body should be adorned with the Vinaya discipline. For the Kadampa practitioner, you should wear the three Dharma robes and have the disciplined conduct of the Vinaya. Your speech should be adorned with the Tripitaka, the three baskets or collections of Vinaya, sutras, and Abhidharma. That should adorn your speech, the Tripitaka, and your mind should be adorned, and you should practice with the three trainings, that correspond to these, the Vinaya, Sutra, and Abhidharma, the um, pure discipline as a basis, and then samadhi or meditation, and the third training is training in wisdom or prajna, discriminating awareness. And then they had the Kadampas had four main yidams or deities that they emphasized. Shakyamuni Buddha was not really practiced as a yidam, but because he was the founder of Buddhism, the source of all Dharma. They developed uh, liturgies of practice and sadhanas of veneration and offering connected with Shakyamuni Buddha. And then they practiced Chenrezira, Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva compassion, for the development of compassion. Without compassion, there's no Mahayana. There's no way of attaining Buddhahood. And in order to dispel outer and inner obstacles, they practiced Tara, and they practiced this wrathful deity, Achala, the immovable one, Achala or Myowa. And so those are the four Kadampa deities. So now we're going to go to another text, and it's a shorter text, and hopefully I'll be able to get through it. It's very short, actually, that describes in brief. This is a short text by Mipam Rinpoche, um, uh, talking about the four Dharma lineages of Tibet. And so hopefully Yuntin's going to be able to bring this up. And I'm just mainly, I'll make a few comments. I'll just read through what he says about the, some of the defining characteristics and kind of like characteristics or attributes of these schools. It's really short, but it's very, very beautiful. So this is called, so it's a very short text that this great 19th century master Mipam Rinpoche wrote. He wrote many, many great texts, and this is a very short one. And so then, he's going to talk about in brief these, what we saw. He's going to start with the Nyingmapas because they were the first school, right, the ancient ones. And so they practice the secret mantra. And what distinguishes them among all the schools, the Nyingmapas emphasize really tantric practice the most. So they emphasize the practice of the actual tantra, not so much the study. They do have the study of the tantras, but the practice of this secret mantra in terms of the ground of the practice, the path itself, how the tantras are practiced, and the result that comes from practicing these tantras, the actual tantra, the meaning of the tantras they practice, and they aspire. It said, so the Nyingmapas, they're characterized by a very high view. And this is the view of the Dzogchen, of the Great Perfection, based upon and in accord with, the high, middle way view as is set forth by Nagarjuna and spiritual heirs. There's no view more profound than the Dharmachakra, the middle way view developed by Nagarjuna, Aryadeva, and so forth. But the Dzogchen has a kind of unique terminology and a unique way of describing the view, which is quite extraordinary. So they emphasize this high view of Dzogchen and the delight in the stable conduct. And many great Nyingmapa practitioners, they reach the level of what's called an awareness holder, Riksin in Tibetan, or Vidyadhara in Sanskrit. So Vidyadhara is like an accomplished master of Vajrayana. And this is especially emphasized. They have 4 levels of Vidyadhara, which I'm not going to go into, but so the highest level is like like enlightenment, but in a kind of tantric framework and through the vehicle, through the way of tantric practice. So they reach the Vidyadhara levels and attain siddhi or accomplishment. The majority of many of the great Nyingma practitioners were Ngakpas, these great householder yogis, who wore white robes and ruled their hair long, and whose power is superior to others. Well, so with that, he's describing, and that was the school that Mipam Rinpoche himself. Actually, Mipam was a monk, great upholder of the Vinaya and a great scholar. But this is what he practiced. So he was kind of unlike a lot of the Nyingma. He was actually, unlike. He was like superior to most others. He was considered an emanation of Manjushri. And then so within the next school that arose, and so we talk about the Sarma schools consisting of Kaju and Sakyapa. He goes out of order of this historically. So Kaju and Sakya arose about the same time. And so they're kind of like brothers because they arose in similar, at roughly the same time. So first he's going to describe the Kajupas, the protectors of beings. We use this terminology. The great masters of the traditions were called Drogan because they, it's when you attain a high level of Dharma practice, you become the Sangha yourself. You develop the qualities of the Sangha. At that point, your benefit to beings is so tremendous that you're like a protector. You can, like the three jewels, you can protect others from suffering. So they're called the protectors of beings. And so we Kajupas, we're the lineage of devotion. We emphasize devotion. And for many, just receiving the lineage blessing, it's like that's sufficient. So you really receive you receive the blessing of the lineage of your root and the root and lineage gurus, and through this you can develop the city. It's kind of quite amazing and see the nature of mind without having done the tremendous amount of practice or especially study. Um, and then most attain city through. So we emphasize we're called the practice lineage. So we emphasize the perseverance in practice. Like Milarepa, just um, uh, his practice. He practiced with such austerity. It's like Milarepa was like the ideal. Because the austerities with which, most of you probably heard of Milarepa and heard a little bit about how he practiced. His level of austerity is not something we can even imagine, let alone doing. So it's like these days it's said, no one can practice like Milarepa anymore, but still we have him as an example. So we emphasize, we should have, I'm not a good example, we should emphasize practice. And we're kind of like Nyingmapas. And Kaju and Nyingma practices, actually many of the Nyingma tantras and practices have permeated the Sarva schools, but especially we Kajupas. And then it's said, and this is true, we mingle very well with the Nyingmapas. And, there's a lot of people, who are Kajupas and they're kind of like closet Nyingmapas, they basically practice Nyingma. So that's, so actually, like I heard Lama Karma, I think in a few weeks he's going to talk about uh, our lineage. He can say more about that. Um, but we're Kanju and Nyingma were very close, and it's like the third Karmapa, in fact held both lineages, and third Karmapa Rangjung Dorje actually disseminated the Dzogchen teachings to a very great extent. So he was very important also for the Nyingmapas. And so I should say here, this is not clear. Sometimes you hear these words like Nyingma or Nyingmapa, Kaju or Kajupa. So what's this? We have the Pa. So the Pa, so Nyingma is like I explained the term. That's the old lineage, the ancient tradition, the ancient school. Kaju, the Ka is like means instruction. It's like really literally refers to the Buddha's words, Ka, like Kanjur, that we call the translated scriptures. So the Ka is the Buddha's words, and by extension, the oral instructions of our gurus, the great masters, the great gurus of the past. So Ka, and then or I should say Gyu, is lineage, or it literally means it's the same kind of similar word to Tantra. It literally means continuity, or lineage, or transmission. How something gets passed down. So we're the lineage of we're the lineage of the instructions. And then so that a similar term is kadampa. So ka is the same as ka, and then dampa, dam is like the instructions. And so the kadampas are those who practice the essential instructions and take it to heart and put it into practice. So they who really practice. So Kaju is similar. So with a lineage of the essential instructions of the Guru's law lineage. So the pa is the one who is the person. It's like pronoun. It makes it a pronoun. The person that or the people who practice it. So the Nyingmapas are those who practice Nyingma. Kajupas are those who practice like Kajupa. You know, and Sakya is Sakya is the school, and then Sakyapa is the person who practices Sakya, and then there's the Gendempas or Gelugpas. So that's the Kaju. There's a lot that we have to say. And all these schools have like sub lineages, many sub lineages. We have these four major lineages or four elder lineages. We have the younger lineages. Also in Sakya they have some branches of Sakya we're going to talk about. Anyway, Kajupa, in terms of our tantric practice, we emphasize Mahamudra as the view meditation and conduct of Mahamudra, or the Great Seal. And then in terms of the tantric deities, like I say, all these Sarma schools practice these later tantras. And so our major deities in Kaju are Vajrayogini and Chakrasamvara. And so those are like Kajupas. Everybody practices these. These two deities are the most important. We also have others, but this is like, if you're Kajupa, you definitely, practice, Vajrayogini and Chakrasamvara. So Chakrasamvara is also a name of a tantra. So the deity Chakrasamvara came out of arose from the tantra is the source, is the textual source of the different deities. Okay, so then he's going to go out of order, but let's skip over this. Let's go to Sakyapa. We're running out of time. We're 9:22. Okay, then the Sakyapas. I have a very good connection with Sakya. I had the good fortune of meeting the Sakya Trichin, the great supreme master of Sakya, and other. I've met several Sakya Kempos, and kind of like I've learned. I've been able to ask them questions. So I have some connection with the Sakyas, and I have great respect for them. So they emphasize what's called approach and accomplishment of the secret mantra. They really emphasize the Yidam deity. So the approach is the mantra repetition, and the completion stage practices that goes along with that. And then the accomplishment is another aspect, and that's like a deeper aspect of the practice. So many are blessed through the power of their recitation, because they keep the samaya or the commitment with their yidam. They're very, very pure about this, as he says here. Because of this, so they're able to incredible, great blessing and city just through the power of their. They don't, it's like they never skip a day. Their recitation and meditation becomes very, very strong and powerful, and so they uphold their own tradition very well. So it's like the Sakyapas, like they have a very unique transmission, which emphasizes the Hebadra Tantra, the deity Hebadra, and what's called a path and result, the Lamdre, which is an entire system of practice based upon the Hebadra Tantra and its instructions. So they keep their commitments, their samayas, extremely well, and so it said because of this, they're exemplary of all the schools. The Sakyapas are the best in terms. They don't miss a day. they're keeping their daily practice commitments. And when compared to, then he also says, when compared to other traditions, they have something of them all. So Sakya has also known for an extremely profound and great teaching tradition, and the explanatory tradition of the tantras and also the sutras. So they some of their scholars like Sakya Pandita, they don't have time to talk about him now. I was hoping to talk about him. He's one of the what they call one of the three great Madhushas of Tibet. He was incredibly great scholar and practitioner. And he also was a Sanskrit translator. It was really, really important in terms of the his influence on Tibetan Buddhism as a whole, not only in Sakya. So anyway, so they have a great explanatory tradition, and many great scholars arose. So they're famous for their explanatory tradition. The way they uphold the practice of the Vajratantra. They also have an ancient lineage going back to Guru Rinpoche of the Vajrakilaya Tantra and its practice, and others. But mainly, their main deity is Hebadra, Jepa Dorje, or literally means Vajra joy. Vajra joy. So this is another tantra deity. That's their main thing. And they're very great. So they have something of everything, but the main upholders of this tradition, and this was upheld by a very great family lineage, and it's called the Kun lineage. The Kun, so the Kun is this, it's like the name of a clan, this ancient clan that actually goes back to the time of Guru Rinpoche. And the first great holder of the Sakya lineage who built the Sakya monastery in central Tibet was Sachin Kunganingpo, and then the fourth of the five was, I'm not going to talk about them all, Sakya Pandita, talked about a little bit, and then Chugya Papa, his nephew, because Sakya Pandita was a monk, but this is passed in a family lineage. And so all of the Sakya treasons come from this Kun family, and it's one of the most famous, one of the most important Dharma families in Tibet. And the Sakya treasons of any generation are very, very highly regarded, considered, very, very great masters. So that's a little bit about Sakya. I have to move along here. So now we'll go back and we'll talk about a little bit about, so Gelugpa arose out of the Kadampas. It's not clear here. He just says, so another name for them is Riwo Gandempas or Gendempas. Riwo means of the mountain, because the first monastery that was built by their founder, the great Jade Tsongkhapa, his monastery of Tushita, called Ganden, Ganden is the name of the heaven of Maitreya, the pure realm of Maitreya is called Tushita heaven in Sanskrit, Tushita or Ganden in Tibetan, was built on this mountain or a hill or something, and so that's why they're sometimes called Rio. The Gandempas are Ganden is like of the Ganden monastery, because that was Tsongkhapa's own personal monastery, and the throne holder of Ganden. So the first throne holder of Ganden was Jade Tsongkhapa himself, and then Then after he passed away, his disciples Kedrubje is one of them, and Kedrubje and Gyaltsabje became the second and third up the throne holders of the Ganden throne. So the Ganden Tripa is the head of the Gelugpa school, and so there's a Ganden Tripa. What's his name? Losang Tenzin is his name. So this is completely different. This is an elected position. The greatest scholars and masters are elected to this position. So that's how it works, and it's a 7-year. They get a 7-year term, and then another one, kind of takes their place. So now, like I think we're on like the 100 something, at least 104, maybe higher than that. So there's been a lot of Ganden Tripas, and they emphasize the tradition of scholars. So also you can say this a little bit about the also about the Sakyalpas having, as I said, have a great scholarly tradition. And they delight in analytical meditation. The Qigong analytical meditation is where you study the reasonings, you study reasoning and logic and debate, and you refute mistaken ideas through the power of logic, and basically clear thinking. And when you find defects in the line of reasoning of another, like kind of inferior views, you always find these inconsistencies, things that don't add up or make sense. You expose that, so you develop very sophisticated and high view through analysis, and you study, and through analysis you establish the view. So they delight in analytical meditation, and they enjoy debate. So of all the schools, they spend a lot of time doing debate. When you go to a Gelugpa Shedra, so they spend hours a day doing debate, where the other schools, like maybe an hour, like an hour or two, maybe. But the Gelugpas, it's a big thing. So they're the best debaters. And sometimes they have these all-night sessions. They literally go all night. So they're really big on debate, and especially, so Tsongkhapa was a great upholder of Vinaya, the monastic discipline. So many of his disciples, to this day, they really reformed and kind of like purified, the monastic discipline, and so many are great, are great upholders of the Vinaya, great monks and nuns. And so they became at the time of the fifth Dalai Lama, like the state religion. So therefore he said they were popular, prosperous, and strived to in the study of the great treatises. So that's all the time we have. I took all the time. Now we're going. This good thing we don't have time for questions. We don't. You can ask them next week. So now we're going to chant the dedication and aspiration prayer. So this is a little bit long-winded. I apologize for that. And, anything good that came out of it was, based upon the teachings that I've received. Okay, so let's, Yunton, if you can put up the dedications, we'll chant them quickly. Jakuni je ranzo karma pa jakun chenne chitu karma pa jakun dun so wankor karma pa ujin rudu chenne shakten so. What's next? I have to see what's next here. Sonam ti tamche zipani tokne ne pedranam pamchene kegana chi pana chupani sipe tsune kunyu drosho Jambo pama jita kempada kunju zambo deya nishinde Deda kunji jisu damuchi gema dida tamche raktu Sanji kusum ne bejin nada chuni minju de bejin nada gendun mi che dun bejin naki jita no mama nanju parsho Dushile jaja chunne pa garma baten de beni bodhi Chutar kunja kapchi jume che Tapara pel pelwe tashi shu. My voice is becoming strained. It's late. So this is really the end. I can't speak anymore. Thank you very much. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to teach. And I hope it was beneficial. Pray that it was beneficial. Good night.